I spent the entire afternoon in the kitchen, chopping, stirring, tasting, trying to recreate the meals Brandon used to love when he was little. The familiar smell of rosemary chicken and buttery mashed potatoes filled the house, wrapping me in a warmth I hadn't felt in months. Tonight was supposed to be a reset, a chance to remind my son that no matter how chaotic our lives had become, we were still a family. I laid the table with care, my grandmother's lace runner, the good plates, the candles that flickered gently like they were rooting for us. For once, the house felt hopeful. Then the front door slammed. Brandon stomped in, not even glancing at the effort I'd poured into the evening. He tossed his jacket onto the couch like it offended him just by existing. "Seriously, Mom? This what you wasted all day on?" he muttered, scanning the table with a curled lip. My heart sank, but I forced a smile. "I thought we could talk tonight. A real dinner, just the two of us." Yeah, he snapped. "Couldn't you at least buy better furniture? This house looks like a thrift store exploded." The words hit harder than I expected. I swallowed, steadying myself. "Brandon, can we please start this evening with respect?" He scoffed, dragging out the chair and plopping down with the grace of a wrecking ball. The bitter storm he brought in with him seemed to swallow the warm glow I had tried so hard to build. As I sat across from him, his eyes full of impatience and entitlement, one truth settled heavily in my chest. This dinner wasn't going to heal anything. It was only the beginning. The meal barely lasted 5 minutes before Brandon started in again. He shoveled food onto his fork like he was doing me a favor by even being there, sighing dramatically after every bite. I tried, really tried, to steer the conversation somewhere gentler. "So how's work going?" I asked quietly. He didn't look up. "Terrible. You know why? Because you won't help me out. Everyone else my age gets support from their parents. Meanwhile, you're hoarding your money like some dragon on a pile of pennies." I blinked. "Brandon, I've helped you more than you know, but you need to learn." "There you go again," he snapped, slamming his fork down. "Lecturing, judging, acting like I'm the problem." My throat tightened. "I'm not judging you, I'm just asking you to be responsible. You asked me for money last week." "So what? I need it." I kept my voice steady. "And I told you I couldn't keep supporting you like this." That was all it took. Brandon shot up from his chair so quickly his plate rattled. "You know what? Forget it. You never listen, you never help. Everything in this stupid house is cheap and old, just like—" He swung his arm toward the table, maybe to gesture, maybe to intimidate, but his hand slammed into the edge with a violent shove. The world slowed. My grandmother's heirloom vase, the one she carried from her hometown, the one she said held our family's strength, teetered, then dropped. The crash echoed through the room like a scream. Brandon's only reaction was a smirk. "Should have bought something sturdier, Mom." My breath froze in my chest. In that single moment, I realized something irreversible had broken, and it wasn't just the vase. The sound of the vase shattering didn't fade. It lingered, vibrating through my bones long after the last fragment settled. I stared at the floor, at the scattered pieces of blue and white porcelain that had survived 3 generations, but not my son. Brandon stood there, arms crossed, chin lifted, daring me to react. For a moment, I almost did. My lips trembled with the weight of 1,000 unsaid words: anger, heartbreak, disbelief. Every instinct inside me screamed to shout, to cry, to demand why the boy I raised had become someone so cruel. But I didn't do any of that. I inhaled slowly, deeply, and then I said nothing. Brandon frowned. He wasn't expecting silence. He was expecting fire, an explosion he could weaponize, twist, and throw back at me. But I denied him the satisfaction. Instead, I walked past him. Calm, controlled. I knelt and gently lifted a curved shard of the vase, running my thumb along its painted edges. My grandmother's initials were still visible on one piece. The sight should have shattered me. Oddly, it steadied me. Because beneath the grief, something colder, sharper was forming. Brandon shifted behind me. "Oh, come on, Mom. Don't start crying. It's just a vase." his voice dripped with mock sympathy. Still, I said nothing. I placed the shard on the table. Then another. And another. Not to save it. No, it was beyond saving, but to remember. To let the moment brand itself into my mind with perfect clarity. Brandon huffed. Whatever, I'm going to bed. He stomped away, expecting the night to end there, but as his door slammed shut, the silence in the house transformed. No longer the silence of shock. The silence of strategy. Because he thought he broke the only thing that mattered. He had no idea what I was about to break next. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the vase falling, shattering again and again. But by morning, I wasn't numb anymore. I was focused. Brandon thought he lived in a world without consequences. That ended today. I stood in the kitchen with a cup of bitter coffee, staring at my phone. My hands didn't shake, not this time. When I dialed the first number, my sister Linda picked up on the second ring. "Karen, you okay? You sound off." "I need you here," I said. My voice was calm, almost eerily so. "Tonight. It's important." Linda hesitated. She'd seen glimpses of Brandon's entitlement over the years. She knew something serious had happened. "I'll come." The second call was harder. I hadn't spoken to Michael, my ex-husband, Brandon's father, in over a year. He had drifted in and out of our lives for decades, but mostly out. Brandon had inherited more from him than just his dark hair. The distance. The arrogance. The belief that other people existed to serve him. He answered with his usual clipped tone. "Karen? I need you here tonight," I said. A long pause. "Is Brandon okay?" I almost laughed. The irony was suffocating. "He's fine, but you still need to come." Another silence. Then, unexpectedly, "All right, I'll be there." When I hung up, the house felt different, as though the walls themselves sensed what was coming. These weren't just guests. They were ghosts, each carrying a piece of the past Brandon thought he could outrun. Tonight, I wasn't seeking comfort. I was assembling witnesses. And when the truth came out, none of them would forget what they saw. By the time Brandon arrived, the living room was quiet, but charged. The candles I'd lit earlier flickered, casting shadows that seemed to lean closer, listening. Linda sat on the sofa, hands folded, her expression calm but wary. Michael leaned against the doorway, his face neutral, though his eyes betrayed curiosity, and something else, something like guilt. And then the front door slammed. Brandon stepped in with that same confident swagger, like he owned every square inch of the house. His sneakers squeaked against the hardwood, announcing him like a drum roll. He carried his usual smirk, the one I'd seen hundreds of times when he knew he was untouchable. "Evening," he said, voice loud, dripping with entitlement. "Hope everyone's ready for one of Mom's famous lectures." I met his gaze, calm, deliberate, not a flicker of panic, not a hint of apology, and certainly no fear. He blinked, clearly taken aback. This wasn't the usual reaction he got. "Brandon," I said smoothly, "sit, we need to talk." He dropped into the chair across from me with exaggerated patience, as though waiting out a slow storm. His eyes roamed the room, landing on Michael. Recognition flashed for a fraction of a second before it vanished. He didn't like this dynamic, this room full of people he thought he could manipulate with charm or irritation. Linda's gaze cut into him next, sharp and unyielding. He tensed. Michael's neutral stance only added weight. For the first time in months, maybe years, Brandon sensed that the tide had shifted. He smirked anyway, a shield, a challenge. "Well," he said, leaning back, "let's get this over with." I didn't respond. I let him stew. Let him believe he still held the upper hand. He didn't, not for long. I leaned back slightly in my chair, letting the silence stretch. Brandon shifted impatiently, smirking, clearly expecting me to scold him, to break down, to beg for the heirloom he had so casually destroyed. He didn't get it. Not tonight. "Brandon?" I said slowly, deliberately. Do you know how much that vase was worth? He laughed. Worth? It was old pottery, Mom. 100 years, maybe 200? It's junk. I held his gaze. Not junk. Not even close. The room seemed to contract around us. Linda's hands tightened in her lap. Michael straightened, the shadow of surprise crossing his face. Brandon frowned, confused, sensing the gravity of my tone. $45,000, I said, each word sharp, deliberate, like a hammer striking glass. Insured, in perfect condition, now destroyed. His smirk faltered. His eyes darted to the shards still on the table. What are you talking about? I'm talking about consequences, I said, voice low but cutting. You broke a piece of our family that no money could ever replace, and yet, ironically, it had value far beyond what you imagined. He laughed nervously, trying to regain control. $45,000? That's insane! You're exaggerating! I didn't flinch. I let the numbers hang in the air, heavy, tangible. Brandon's face paled. For the first time, the aura of invincibility he carried like armor began to crack. This isn't about the vase, I said, standing slowly, letting my voice echo in the tense room. It's about understanding that every action has a price. Tonight, you're learning yours. Brandon swallowed hard, his smirk gone, replaced by a flicker of fear he hadn't felt since childhood, and I smiled quietly, knowing this was only the beginning. Brandon's eyes, still wide from the vase revelation, darted around the room as if looking for an escape route. He glanced at Michael, hoping for some invisible loophole, some ally, some miracle. There wasn't one. I took a slow breath, letting the tension build. There's more, I said, keeping my voice calm, almost clinical, something you probably never realized. He rolled his eyes, but it faltered this time, just slightly. Oh, here we go? Another lecture? I shook my head. Not a lecture. A reality check. I pulled a folder from the table, the edges crisp, the paper thick. I spread it out. This is the divorce agreement from your father and me. You were supposed to inherit a trust fund, meant to support you while you built a future. His mouth opened, then closed. His jaw tightened. He leaned forward, curiosity overcoming his arrogance. But there was a condition. I continued, voice even, almost soothing. You had to show maturity. Responsibility. Respect. You had to demonstrate that you could honor what you were given. I watched as recognition slowly dawned. His smirk, the one that shielded him from consequences, wavered. By shoving the table, smashing the vase, and treating this home, and me, with disrespect, I said softly, almost like a teacher correcting a careless student, you officially disqualified yourself. Every penny, gone, forever. The silence that followed was deafening. Brandon's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, closed it again. A single, hollow laugh escaped, but it held no power. He had believed the world owed him. He had believed I couldn't touch what was his. Tonight he realized how wrong he was. And for the first time, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. The room was thick with tension. Brandon's face twisted with disbelief, his usual defiance wobbling on unsteady legs. He looked at Michael, as if expecting his father to intervene, to shield him, to tell me I'd gone too far. But Michael didn't flinch. For the first time in years, he leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped, voice calm but firm. Brandon, he said, cutting through the air like a knife. Your mother is right. You've had everything handed to you and you've treated it, and everyone around you, with entitlement. Enough is enough. Brandon's jaw dropped. Wait, what? You're taking her side? You never. Michael held up a hand, stopping him. I wasn't around much, true. I failed in many ways. But this isn't about the past. This is about now. Your behavior, your choices, they're yours alone. And it's time you face the consequences. I felt a quiet surge of vindication. This was more than I could have planned. His own father, the man who had drifted out of our lives, was finally saying what needed to be said. Brandon's defiance wavered, just slightly. His entitlement, so carefully curated over decades, faltered under the weight of undeniable reality. Linda's eyes sparkled with a mixture of pride and relief, and I felt it too. This was the moment the tides truly shifted. Michael straightened, meeting Brandon's stunned gaze. "You've got the world thinking you're untouchable, son, but real strength comes from learning accountability. Tonight, you start learning." Brandon's mouth opened, then closed again. Words failed him. He had no shield, no ally, and no excuse left. For the first time, he was completely exposed. Brandon's face was a mixture of disbelief and panic, his earlier arrogance completely drained. I let the silence stretch, letting every second weigh on him like a physical force. He kept staring at me, as if the truth might somehow vanish if he willed it hard enough. "Brandon," I said, voice calm, deliberate, almost ceremonial, "you think this is about a vase, or money, or me taking control." I paused, letting my words sink. "It's bigger than that, much bigger." His brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" I stood, letting the folder slide across the table. "This trust fund, which you believed was yours by birthright, is no longer yours. But I won't waste it, nor will I let it feed your entitlement. Instead," I let my eyes sweep over the room, catching Linda's nod and Michael's quiet support. "I'm donating every last dollar to a community arts center in my grandmother's name. The same grandmother whose vase you smashed." Brandon's mouth opened, then closed. A strangled sound, half scream, half laugh, escaped. "You can't do that. That's my money." "No, Brandon," I said softly, stepping closer. "It was never yours to squander. It was meant for someone who could honor it. Someone who could see the value in legacy, in respect, in care. You've proven you cannot." The room was still. The weight of the decision hung over him like a storm cloud. He opened his mouth again, but no words could undo what had been decided. In that moment, I felt a surge of clarity, of liberation. The ultimate revenge wasn't anger. It wasn't spite. It was justice. It was reclaiming what he had taken for granted. It was honoring the legacy he thought he could destroy. Brandon finally understood. He had lost far more than money. He had lost control. Brandon's face was red, his fists clenching and unclenching as if trying to grab back control he no longer possessed. "This isn't fair. I earned that money. You can't do this to me." I walked past him slowly, calm, deliberate, holding the dessert tray like a shield between us. Chocolate mousse, topped with raspberries, the one he always claimed was his favorite. I placed it in front of him, the calmness in my movements almost mocking his fury. "Sit down, Brandon," I said, voice soft but firm. "Eat, think, breathe." He glared at me, incredulous. "Eat? You think dessert fixes this?" I shrugged slightly, a faint smile playing at my lips. "No, dessert doesn't fix it. Understanding does." He froze, fork trembling in his hand. For the first time, he had nothing to say. No words sharp enough to defend his arrogance. No smirk left to shield him. The room was silent, save for the faint clink of spoon against glass. I sank into my chair across from him, breathing in the scent of the candles, the dessert, the quiet strength I had found in myself. The vase was gone, the trust fund gone, the entitlement shattered, and yet I felt lighter than I had in years. Brandon jabbed at the mousse but didn't speak. The fight had drained from him. The lesson, bitter and impossible to ignore, had settled in. For me, the storm had passed. I had reclaimed my power, my dignity, my grandmother's legacy, and in that reclamation, I was reborn. Sometimes, the sweetest victory isn't in shouting. It's in standing calm, unshaken, and letting justice speak for itself. And tonight it had spoken.